I mean, essentially, if you know nothing, there's a table. Welcome to the Strong Casuals podcast. My name is Ben, and I'm here today with my brother Eric.
Hello.
We are going to go through, I'm going to go through, and I'm going to do my best to explain, in no complete way, but at least in a way, arm wrestling.
Excellent.
I think arm wrestling gets kind of a bad name. I think it's kind of, it's synonymous with like toxic masculinity. And it doesn't, and the people that know, they're like, no, it takes skill. It does take skill. And it still sort of exists in this weird space where people just view it as kind of a pissing contest. But that's not true. And we'll do our best to make that clear.
Pulling, as it's called.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So, like,
that opened my mind up to that it's not just pushing the other person's arm down. It's
right.
A different type of strength here.
Yeah, it's not, and that's how people get hurt, and that's how people who don't know what they're doing get hurt. Yeah, which, we could do a different podcast on this, but
injuries.
Yeah, and it was. I think we talked about this even last time, but it was included as an event in a World's Strongest Man competition back in the early '80s, and I think it was either Magnus Samuelsson or John Paul Sigmarsson broke some guy's arm or wrist or something. Okay, so as with most of these strength sports, they've been around essentially forever. I think people have been trying to test strength and pose their strength against somebody else for forever. And from what I've been able to find and look at, it sort of served different purposes. Sometimes settling a dispute, which would be kind of funny. Oftentimes, I know Moss wrestling, I think, was this way. Stone lifting in Iceland and other coastal countries, it was a way to prove your strength to get a job. So I know a lot of guys would get jobs that were laborious by proving their strength in a way, whether it be lifting a stone or, in this case, arm wrestling. Or as wrist wrestling, as some people call it. Apparently, it was huge in Japan for a very long time, and still is, as wrist wrestling. There's a pretty big following in Japan.
Same idea of...
Yep.
Same form, basically.
Slightly different rules, I think, but the same idea. You're trying to overcome the other person's strength within some parameters. I saw some stuff was quoting, ancient Egypt and hieroglyphics and stuff. I don't know. Honestly, don't know. It could have been a handshake. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's how vetted that is, but I mean...
Who knows? I mean, the Egyptians were on top of a lot of advanced things, such as...
big, pointy buildings.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's no doubt it's been around a long time, but in its finer... or in its more modern sense, not forever. So, essentially, after the Dark Ages, the quote-unquote modern era, in the 50s, organized competition started to begin to be a thing. And whenever you have competitions, there have to be rules. And so this is something, I'm just sort of making a mental note and a note to people that, I think we were going to come back and we should talk about rule sets in strength sports, period. I mean, we could spend forever talking about them, but the first sort of set of real rules we had came from the WAF, the World Arm Wrestling Federation, in 1977, which, crazy enough, is the first year of World's Strongest Man, and the year that A New Hope came out.
Star Wars, yep.
So, 77 was a big year. But what it did was it not only provided an outlet for people to participate, not semi-professionally, but organized, but it provided a rule set. And so that was a huge thing. People knew what rules they had to abide by and how they could train within those rules now, which was a big thing for them. Up until then, it was like barroom stuff, smack your money on the table and go at it.
That was my conception of it.
Yeah, I think it's most people have that idea, and I think like in a lot of ways, or maybe in well, no, in one way, like arm wrestling is also fighting that, right? Like, I mean, we'll get into trying to like grow the sport, but it has to fight this sort of stereotype of what it most people know it as. So not only are you trying to build a sport, but you're trying to prove to people that it's not just a joke.
Yeah, I mean, from the videos I've seen of Devin,
Yeah.
I mean, he's not taking it too seriously. I mean, having fun with it definitely seems like a draw of it as a sport.
Yeah, and I mean within the world of strength sports, I mean like there's powerlifting, which is very like the USAPL has a very specific set of rules, and you must abide by these rules. And the only dependent variable is how much weight do you lift. And yes, in like strongman and arm wrestling, there's matches and there's competitions and there's winners and there's losers, but they're still born of sort of there's entertainment value, right? Like no one people go to powerlifting competitions, but they're either in it or they're related to somebody in it. You know, like you're not going to go, well, I mean, or you're in the sport if you're involved in it. Like people go to arm wrestling things all the time, or when they were happening more often pre-COVID, but now like East vs. West or King of the Table, like people go even if they have no connection to it at all. But now, well, so World Arm Wrestling Federation has been around for a while. I mean, since '77, and it's run a lot of things internationally since, and a lot of people have been very successful within it. We'll talk about Engin Terzi later, but he's one of them, among other people. So it still exists. It provides the rule set essentially for how all of these other competitions are run. I can go through some basic rules if we want. So if you're completely,
I mean, yeah. I mean, all I know is you need to keep your elbow down. However, one question I have with that is, does it need to be touching the pad or just be at the level of it? Because I've seen some competitions where they were moving their elbow around a bit, and it seemed like that was okay, well, even though it stayed.
Moving while touching is one thing.
Okay.
Lifting off of the pad, different thing. That's a foul.
Okay.
I mean, essentially, if you know nothing, there's a table. There is a regulation table. The table has some stuff on it. It's a rectangular table. There's two pads in the center, offset from each other, where you put your elbow, and then those can switch depending on if you're going right or left. And then you have a peg on the outermost sections, or the outside portion of the rectangle. So you have to have a hand on the peg, and then your elbow has to be on the pad. And then essentially there's a referee. There's two referees usually. There's a referee that's sort of up and like where they're actually wrestling, and then there's usually another ref who's down in front of the table, focused on things like elbows and other types of fouls. In most cases, they'll give the arm wrestlers a chance to set up by themselves, like play nice, and they'll let them basically palm to palm, and they'll try to grip just the two of them. I would say.
Are there rules around how they're holding each other's hands?
Yeah, so you can chalk up and all that kind of jazz, but you
they have to wait till the time feels right to hold hands.
Well, so the ref will, if say that they're able to grip themselves, the ref will kind of hold their hands, and then the ref will let them go. I would say the vast majority of at least things that I've seen in modern day have to go to a referee's grip. So the referee is the one who's putting their palms together, folding their fingers in, and then deciding when they're going to go. But like you said before, part of the show of arm wrestling is the setup. Like if you watch, Devin Larratt, I mean he's known for his mind games. He'll get into the other guy's mind. And even if he's, I mean, other guys do it too. I mean, back in the Arm Wars days, excuse me, it was a little bit more. Now, given we can talk about that later, that was a reality TV show, so there's like a little bit more.
Arm Wars was?
Yeah.
Huh,
So there's a little bit more motivation to make it a little more of a show, but also, I mean, that's what grows the scene.
Yeah.
So they'll if they grip up themselves, great. If they go to a referee's grip without all the minutia, essentially the referee just puts their hands together the way they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Do they put chalk on their
Yeah.
hands? Is there? I'm guessing there are probably rules about what they can put on their hands.
Yeah, you
Well,
can chalk up.
I guess it's probably advantageous to both
Yeah.
athletes to have a good connection to the other
Yeah.
person's hand.
Well, yeah, and so yeah, they both usually they chalk up. There's a really funny rule, not a funny rule, but there's a WAF rule about your fingernails have to be trimmed, which I guess like that's important.
Yeah.
You don't want to claw somebody, but yeah, so they it is in some ways advantageous for them to be able to have a good grip, but I don't know if we're going to talk about this now, but most arm wrestlers will tell you need to learn to slip. Like you need to learn to get out if you need to get out. Which
In terms of strategy or safety? Or...
strategy. Like, so there's ways to, like, you can't, per the rules, you can't just, like, give up. Like, you can't just, like, pull your hand away. But if you slip out, they're going to go to a strap. So, like, if you're... Sometimes you're maybe in a bad starting position, or after he hits it, you're just not there. You're basically looking to find a way to slip. So either you're sort of like, pulling crossing your hand, or some way you're sort of shaking the other person off,
causing the ref to say, you guys gotta use the strap.
Yeah,
if you're not
right.
Okay.
So if they slip out, then the ref will give. Usually, I think it's 2 thumbs up, and so we'll go to a strap. And so then it's all the referees doing everything. They're putting palms together. They put the strap around, and they wrap the strap around their hands, both of their wrists, and back up. And how they do that can always be a little bit of a thing. And
going from holding hands to the strap on pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. It's arm wrestling, and. The whole time that they're doing this, part of what the show is like both competitors, both people are trying to get better, like a better advantage. So they're like trying to get their elbow in a better spot. They're trying to raise their hand up. They're trying to get their hand up so they can get a better grip. They're trying to maneuver themselves so they're in the best possible place they could be. And so they're kind of fighting the ref. They're kind of fighting each other for the setup. But when you go to a strap, that's either incredibly beneficial for people or it's their downfall. I feel like this is just
based on how they've trained their strength or strategy. Or...
Well, and like where their skills are. Some guys are real fast, so I mean they're like their strategy is I'm gonna pin you as fast as I possibly can. Like the second that goes, it go. And then some guys are just like brute strength endurance athletes, and I would argue Devin Laird is one of those. I mean, I've seen competitions where, or like bouts where Devin will like, whoever he's up against will just smash his arm, and he'll give him like a bit, like he'll go towards his pad.
It seems
more
like
than
once
you would
you've
affect.
Moved your arm, like more than
Losing
90
it.
like when you're not both like 90 degrees up or whatever, you're just gonna lose quick. But in those videos it just looks like he's toying with his prey.
Oh
basically.
Yeah, he absolutely doesn't. But he just catches them, and he'll just like catch them and hold them. And he's a guy who like he'll end up bringing you back. Like he has the ability to like endure and basically wear the other person out, because when you go, you're accessing like your entire body. It's not just your arm. Like you've got a pin or you got a peg, so your peg is connecting you to the table, But now you're pulling, so your biceps engaged, front delt, all of your lats, but your other side's engaged too because you're hooked onto the table, so you can use that to your advantage. So I mean, when you go, it's a full body workout, and that's the reason that some guys wins is because they can just sit there, and if you're in a strap, you can't pull out of it, so you got to sit there. And if you can last longer, then the guy can pin them. So eventually, once they go, if they go to a strap, it can be a benefit. But if you're not a person who can, hold on, you're kind of done. And then to pin them, you basically have to, depending on the table, some tables have actual pads on the outside of the rectangle, like to the left and right of the athletes. And then as long as you hit the pad, or if you pin the other person's hand on the pad, that's over. And then some of the newer tables have like two pegs that come out, and there's it looks like a hurdle, like tiny little hurdles. And the idea is you break the plane, or you you break the plane to prove that you've pinned the guy. And I mean, just like with any sport, you've got two refs trying to see everything at one time. And so you end up with a lot of disagreement sometimes.
Do the new incarnations of the leagues have video replay or that type of thing?
I mean, they have they show video replays. It doesn't necessarily impact the thing all the time, and that's a big complaint. I don't know, critique of where we're at right now, which we can talk about whatever. But I mean, we're in a situation where reffing kind of sucks at the professional level. I don't mean to throw, but it's hard to do. But a lot of times with a sport that doesn't have a whole lot of following, it's hard to find whatever. But all the tournaments that Engen puts on, so King of the Table and East versus West, they pull in these guys and they kind of know what they're doing. But maybe I shouldn't make this statement, but I'm willing to bet that there are refs throughout all of the United States that ref tiny little regional tournaments at bars every weekend who are 10 times the ref those guys are.
Huh, interesting. I mean, I guess you could make some sort of device that is has this been touched? Arm has come down. Yeah. Some switch has been flipped and
And then, I mean, you totally could. I mean, it brings in the whole. I mean, that's a debate or conversation in all sports. Is at what point does the ref become is a ref a part of the game? Is the error of the ref part of playing the game, or is that
I guess same could apply to has their elbow left the
totally
thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm I feel like those type of technological things could feel more fair, but as far as the show of it goes, having the refs be there and
well, they'd still have to set them up. I mean, they'd still have to they'd be there. I mean, I think those are simple things we could do to take out some error. There were some pictures from the last East versus West that were pretty bad. They're I mean, there's shots of dudes with their elbows 4 inches off the pad, and nobody called a damn thing. And I mean, it's not amazing. And I mean, the community knows it, and they still watch it, and we still love it. But it's it's a complaint that is being made, and I think some of that could be solved by. Well, I don't know. I think a lot of it's going to get solved by better. Yeah, but I think a lot of that could be helped by just having more.
I mean, rather than complaining about the refs, does that change people's view of the outcome of the match? They're well, he did this, he's an elbow lifter,
Yeah. He's yeah. I don't think I think just like any sport, you have people that are good at losing and people that are bad at losing. And I think that there are people who are legitimately think that I mean, the refs screwed me on this one or whatever. And there's also times where it's just very obvious that it had nothing to do with the refs. And I mean, I'm not throwing, I feel like we've said Devin's name 17 times already, but when Devin wrestled Levon, there was no, it didn't really matter. I mean, Devin could have fouled, Levon could have fouled. It was a clear winner.
So I guess like going back to like rules and format of the events, is that what you call them?
Yeah.
Like they do many. What's one singular about a heat?
Yeah. So like it depends on the tournament, and it depends on how it's like what type of match it is. So the match between or how many matches you're gonna do. Like sometimes it's best of 5, sometimes it's best of 3, sometimes it's best of 6. As you get into the higher like the super, not the super, but like the what am I looking for? Like the top, the headliner, if you will. They'll usually go best out of 6. And depending on what happens, if someone blows away the other person, so like a while ago, Devin Larrett arm wrestled Michael Todd, and they wrestled all 6. Devin had already won, but they do some friendly stuff. Well, I think they wrestled all 6. Maybe they went left-handed. I don't know. It's a thing that happens. So sometimes they'll like finish, like even if the guys won, they'll still like wrestle, because in arm wrestling, this is like when you compete, it's like a chance for you to use your skill against someone who's as good as you. Mm-hmm. And like it's a sport where you just get better at doing it by doing it. So it's when you compete, it's an opportunity to like learn from the person you're arm wrestling and to like learn from them, and it's like a really good practice. So sometimes they'll run all 6, but a lot of times it might just be best out of 5. But I mean, it's just like any other. Well, it's like if you combat sports or whatever. Like when you get to the last couple rounds, if there isn't a clear winner and they're both ragged, it's a completely different game. I mean, it's like when they're
just
both
like out of strength.
Yeah, I mean when they're both fresh at the beginning and everything's great, it's one thing. But then when you're in like round 4 or whatever, and they've both just been given everything.
So does it depend on the tournament type whether they'd use their non-dominant hand, or is that like an agreement or a thing they decide on during the?
No, beforehand. So you enter like whatever you're gonna, like your weight class essentially, and then if you're right or left. So I didn't say that before, but arm wrestling's weight classed, so it's like it's divided by your weight. So there's like it's a pretty standard separation, similar to things like powerlifting, where it's like under whatever 93 kg or whatever. I don't know if it's 93 in arm wrestling, but and then there's the heavyweights, and then there's the super heavyweights.
Does overall body weight translate to arm strength skill, or like skill in arm wrestling?
I mean, strength for sure, probably. I mean, there's the old adage like mass moves mass. So in general, like, you're competing against bigger guys, you're going to have more mass moves, more mass. So, but like the skill side, that's completely up to the competitor. I mean, you could be a giant dude. And this is proof of this is, so we talked I don't know if we talked about it. There's or no, that was in the oopsie. But, so school bus, as they're calling him now. He's 22 now, but when he was like 16, 17, he got popular by taking a camera and an arm wrestling table and just going into the middle of a city, and he would just arm wrestle anybody. And like these huge dudes, like popcorn muscle guys, like hypertrophy nuts who just like have giant muscles, would come over,
like roided out bros.
Yeah.
Okay.
and they'd show up and he'd demolish them. And I mean the funny thing is he's like this. He's a boy. He's not a boy anymore, but like he's this little kid that's like, and destroys them all because A, it's a skill set, and B, it's a certain type of, or it's a certain like select muscle groups that they're using that you don't always use, right? It's also a good excuse to do curls for the girls because bicep strength does really matter in this sport. So,
but like coming from hearing you guys say like pulling as like the verb for it, like is that really how they're kind of imagining it? Like get your body into an orientation where you're just pulling into yourself rather than pushing down?
Well, so there's different techniques which we don't have to go into in and out, but there's techniques that kind of involve like the idea is you're pulling them across your body, or you're sort of pulling them in. There's other ones where there is a push, where you can get them bring your shoulder in, you can get them into a push where you're really pulling and then you're pushing. There's other like top rolls. You're literally coming over the top, which is a terrible movie that arm wrestlers hate because it's
that's a good episode idea. I have not seen that movie.
No.
I've heard good things.
Oh.
And bad things. I've heard things.
I feel like you always like that's one thing where you hear good things from people that are outside of the arm wrestling world, and then you talk to arm wrestlers and like, I hate that movie, or they love it just because it gets more attention to arm wrestling. But yeah, depending on the technique, you're kind of pushing and pulling, which are definitely not like side pressure. So side pressure is what people think of when they think of arm wrestling. They think you're trying to just not put any of your body into it and outside of your forearm, and you're just trying to like push them down. That is a thing, but you're really not utilizing that until you're like well trained. You're not at first. You're really just pulling on the guy. And I mean, if you wanna like prove to people that it's a game of pulling and not side pressure, just arm wrestle anybody.
So like the closer their arm and fist is into you, the easier it is for you to move down. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the closer you pull them in, you're able to engage more muscle or just in a better position. I mean, think about carrying something. If you carry something way out in front of you,
yeah, that makes sense.
But when you bring it right in close, you're able to carry a lot more. But like if you wanna like arm wrestle somebody, don't think about pinning them. Try to pull their fist into your shoulder, and they'll be like, "Oh my god, you're amazing!" And don't even worry about pinning them. And pinning is a bit of a different thing, but because that's a whole body movement. Really, you want to pull them in, and you're using your whole body to pin them down. You're not just using your arm. And if you don't do that, that's when people get into some hairy situations. And
so as long as your elbow is on the pad, there aren't rules about what's happening to the rest of your body. So you have to be holding the peg.
Yeah. You can't like, there's weird rules like you can't touch your face. I don't know why that's a rule, but like,
what if your nose really itches?
Like, yeah, I know. But I would say the most, like if someone was going to jump in right now, those are basically the rules. The biggest, the other rule that you need, that people should know is you can't drop your shoulder under the table. You can drop your so say I'm arm wrestling with my right hand, my left shoulder is fine. My right shoulder cannot drop beneath the table.
Okay.
And it really it impacts a move in arm wrestling, which is called the King's move, which we could do an entire episode on the King's move. It's a contentious move. Essentially, if you're losing, it's a losing position. You're opening up your elbow, and you're essentially just moving your body so that your elbow is preventing your arm for your hand from getting pinned. So you're opening up your shoulder, and you're using the pad on the table to use it as sort of a hinge point to keep your arm up.
Has anyone done that move and come back and won? Seems like you're just
I should know
preventing the inevitable.
This is where the casual part comes in. I don't know. People do it all the time. Michael Todd is notorious for doing it.
Do people do that quickly towards the beginning of a match to try to win?
No. It's usually like I don't know. My understanding is it's like, hey, I'm not just gonna give it to you. I'm gonna burn you a little bit. Like I'm not just gonna give it to you. I'm gonna make you work for it. And this is where rules. This is where the ongoing discussion on rules comes in, because Devin Larratt released some stuff relatively recently, where he talked about the fact that he believes that shouldn't be a rule. That rule exists to stop people from getting hurt, because you're hyperextending your elbow, you're putting your arm in a pretty precarious situation, and you got some strong dudes here, like they could break your arm pretty easily.
Yeah, I have definitely seen some videos of people's arms breaking
Yeah. Well, most of the time that's happening, it's because they open up their they don't keep their shoulders straight on. They're using side pressure, and usually you end up with a spiral fracture. And not to, I may teach anatomy, but I'm not going to do it on this podcast. Like one of the, human long bones are really good at resisting compression. Mm-hmm. So like they're really bad at resisting torsion. So like if you twist that bone, it doesn't take a whole lot to twist that bone and break it.
Okay.
And so when you're arm wrestling and you're not doing it correctly, you open yourself up and you spin, it breaks pretty easily. But yeah, I mean,
I don't think introducing more injuries to the sport is gonna.
No, I mean,
I don't know though. Like people like seeing some
people watch
wild
hockey.
Stuff. Yeah.
Like I'm not dissing on hockey. I'm just saying, what would the
or like
NHL be without
UFC?
fight? Right. Well, and I mean, Devin's point is like, if I decide to do that move, I'm taking it into my own. Like I'm accepting the liability that I might break my arm. And really, you're at a level of sport where these dudes will do it, like and gals. I mean, these people will do it because they're that into it. But yeah, so I mean, there are competitions everywhere. I think anybody can go on Facebook or look around regionally, and there's regional competitions all the time. Here in the Midwest, there are competitions everywhere locally. So usually they're at some sort of establishment around, and they'll run a tournament, and then you just kind of go and whatever, and then there'll usually be a state tournament depending on what state you're in. But it's really a sport that exists regionally for the most part. There have been some attempts at national and international play. So the WAF is a thing, and they have competitions. There was this thing in 2014. They started the WAL, the World Arm Wrestling League, which was founded by Steve Kaplan and David Kotlarek, both professional arm wrestlers. David was a professional arm wrestler, and they tried their best, essentially, to grow the sport through these events, and they were well done. I mean, they were like, you usually could find them on easier than most things when it comes to arm wrestling, but they had a lot of the same guys that we had seen from Arm Wars. Or wait, I haven't talked about Arm Wars yet.
So you could, in 2014, like, you could watch it online or something along those lines?
Yep. Well, maybe not live, but you could see it. But they had events. You could go to the events. They were paid events. I guess I should go back and go to Arm Wars. So Arm Wars in modern history is kind of the most...
Armoires.
Yeah, so each of them had to build an armoire in 45 minutes. So Arm Wars was started by Neil Pickup, who Neil has embedded himself in strength sports.
Neil Pickup?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good name.
Yeah. He's embedded himself in strength sports in a lot of different ways. He himself was an arm wrestler, professional arm wrestler, and he wanted to grow the sport. You see him now. He's got announcing gigs all the time. So he's announced a whole bunch of the King of the Tables and East First Wests. He's announced Strongman events. He's announced Giants Live events. He's got a great voice. He's a great commentator, and he knows what he's talking about because he did it. A lot of times you get guys that are thrown into these roles and they have no idea what's going on. But he started, it's a TV show, essentially, in the early 2000s. And it was sort of like a reality TV show. Like, I don't want to say that and turn people off to it, but it was essentially like trying to follow these guys as they arm wrestled against each other in different sort of bouts. And they had teams that were pitted against each other. But a lot of the guys that were in that got, I don't know about famous, but he brought a lot of those guys into the light. So, I mean, Devin Larratt was in it. John Berzink, if you don't know, you should look him up. I mean, he's basically like before Devin, one of the OGs of modern Western arm wrestling.
Was this on American TV or
Yeah.
UK TV?
Yeah.
I was watching TV at this time. Don't remember seeing it.
Well, I don't know if it was like, I don't know what it was on. Like, I'm not sure it was on cable, but
Like a pay-per-view
there
or
was some
HBO or...
there's some way to watch it. I don't. I mean, there's a yeah. Some of the guys that are coming back now got their did their I don't know, cut their teeth on Arm Wars. Not really cut their teeth. They're basically guys who came out of like regional arm wrestling things, and then this was like the first opportunity they had to like I don't know, put their ability on there. So I mean, like,
Was it the first time like some of these like top arm wrestlers were like competing against each other?
with an audience, with a big audience. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's still a thing. It's still going on, and there's still a lot of good content in through Arm Wars. But yeah, it's just it's a good. It was an opportunity for arm wrestlers to be in the limelight, not the limelight.
Yeah, I feel like getting the feeling of like people yelling and cheering probably.
Yeah. But
Felt good.
what it did was, no matter what it did is it brought a ton of people into the world of arm wrestling. Like people who had no idea that this even existed. It was a conduit for them to like become interested in the sport, which was huge because, you know, if you're regionally, if you're in it, cool. If you're not, you're not. You don't know it exists. And if you do know it, it's your idea of arm wrestling is that it's some sort of alpha male BS, whatever. I mean, it's still it still stinks of that, but like it's not like throw money on the table and whatever. And there's still a world for that, but it brought a lot of people into the sport, realizing that it was a thing. So John Brzik, Michael Todd, Devin Larrett, other guys I'm blanking on right now, all participated in that, and they're back. A lot of them are just back in the game, and they're participating in newer events. So, brief about the WA. The WAL existed for a very brief period of time. It was supposed to be it's supposed to be a WAF-esque kind of thing, Arm Wars thing. They had great events. It was produced well. They had good refs, some guys that have been doing it for a long time. They had good athletes. I mean, they brought in all of the athletes that had names and people knew. They put up some great matches. And then it was around COVID. It just sort of pooped out. And I used to go to their website just randomly sometimes to see if they might have another event.
Did it make any interesting like rule changes or format changes or?
No, I mean, it was not really. It was more content. Like, it was more arm wrestling content that you could get online. You could, I think, yeah, you could stream it live. You could go to the event. In fact, Anthony and I were going to go to an event. We had plans to go, and then COVID hit, and they canceled everything. And they had some cool stuff. Like, they had the super heavyweights get a hammer, and it was like, the match was like who got the hammer in the super matches. Not just the heavyweights, but super matches would be like who gets the hammer, and it would like transfer from person to person or whatever. And you know, it was just good production. It was a good. They still put on a show, and it was more content. It's not always revered by everybody in the world, just because it sort of turned it into the WWE. So
that's a question I was going to ask. Like
It's real to me, damn.
Like, do they choose the athletes they want based on ability and strength or entertainment value? I feel like
all of the above.
Yeah,
I think it's probably what the casting agents are doing when they decide who's going on Survivor. Like, we need somebody who's gonna survive, but also like, no. I mean, legitimately, like, there aren't enough athletes to make that decision. So it's like you had to bring in the guys that knew what they were doing because those are the only guys that knew what they were doing. But it was definitely posed kind of as it was more. And I mean, Engen does this too in King of the Table and East vs. West. But I mean, like, they'd announce guys and there'd be fog coming up, and they'd like they had a walkout song, and then they kind of put on a bit of a show, and not everybody liked that because it was kind of like removing some of the legitimacy of like the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I don't watch a lot of sports in general, but professional sports are 100% that. I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Professional wrestling takes that to an extreme, but like you go to a football game, baseball game, like
right,
they're putting on a show,
Oh, absolutely.
And people like that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I agree. I don't think I
mean, I guess that sets it apart from like some powerlifting where it's just like put up some numbers, but
yeah, no, it does. I mean, if you look at the way that other strength sports function, like a powerlifting meet, there's no fog. In fact, it's like you better like be ready to go because when they call your name, you better get out there and you better do what you're gonna do, and then you're done. And like people cheer if you get 2 white lights, 3 white lights. I mean, people are like happy for you if you do the thing, but you're not like talking smack beforehand.
Yeah.
I mean, and arguably, you're one of the things that I like about powerlifting is you're up against yourself. So it's not like you're beating anybody. It's not like you're gonna talk crap to yourself or something. I guess you could if you're into that. You could, like, I don't know, trash talk yourself or something. But it's a little bit different of a thing. But I mean, this is the world. I mean, it's this is off topic a little bit, but like I think we should do an entire thing about like what strength sports are, because sort of going back to our last episode. If you haven't listened to our last episode, you should listen to our last episode. It's about the World's Strongest Man 2024. Evan Singleton, who took third in the 2024 World's Strongest Man, was doing some YouTube content post competition review thing, and he didn't just imply, he straight up said, he's like, I don't think throwing events should be in World's Strongest Man. It's like, is that a sign of strength?
Is that like where they were like tossing a keg over the thing?
Right. So I don't think he's a huge fan, but I mean, I think he presents an interesting question. Like, is that a feat of strength? And if it is or
because
isn't,
it involves like skill of aiming the thing over the bar, or
well, and it's like, if we're saying if it's booked as World's Strongest Man, like, is being able to throw a keg X amount of feet in the air an adequate, like, whatever of, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that, like, embedded in all of these sports is this sort of idea, like, what is this? Like, I mean, and I think you can make a good argument that powerlifting is legitimately like, there's a rule set, here's the weight, this is what it is. Yeah. But the second you open it up into different events and into like something like arm wrestling, you have to accept a level of, I mean, I don't know, sort of some circus sideshow vibe, you know?
Yeah, I mean, arm wrestling, like, it's a person versus a person, and that changes the whole dynamic. Yeah, like powerlifting, it's you versus some amount of weight, and
right.
Having 2 people competing simultaneously is inherently entertaining, so it lends itself to being, having all the...
And that's why we end up with stone-offs
things
at the end of
around
qualifiers. but yeah, I mean, I think there's a line. It's just, it's hard to draw that. And it's also hard to like get people to agree on what that is. But yeah, so WL existed for a while. It doesn't really exist anymore, at least not as far as I understand. And but the most recent iteration, so the stuff that's like happening right now, which is essentially all of professional arm wrestling, is being I think funded and directed by one dude named Engen. And Engen Terzi, I probably murdered his last name, but I just call him Engen. Everybody just calls him Engen. So he was an arm wrestler, and like probably regarded as one of the best to do it, and sort of in like pseudo retirement. I mean, I don't know if someone said something about him coming back. I don't know, but he's decided that he's like just going to make it as a mission to put this sport back on the map. And so in 2021, he started. He started East vs West and King of the Table, and they're basically just two different iterations of the same thing. King of the Table is just pitting people against each other, no matter where they're from. And then the idea of East versus West is, East versus West. It's like East.
East meaning arm wrestlers from Turkey, or
just anywhere. Like sort of, it's basically like Eastern Europe versus America. Mm-hmm. The land of the free. And so you get guys from the West, including like Brits, whatever. And so that you're competing on sort of a team. There's athletes from both places. King of the Table is just people from wherever. So they started in 2021. They've been going on since then. They're all put on by, or to some degree put on by, Core Sports. So if you're listening to this and you want to watch any upcoming events, you just go to coresports.com, and that's where you get the pay-per-view. Everybody has different feelings about the pay-per-view. Sometimes it kind of sucks. Sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it pauses and it's terrible, and it buffers for years, and it's terribly out of sync. Mm-hmm. But it is content. And it's essentially right now the only thread that is like holding arm wrestling together, at least at that level. But that's been going on since 2021. I've watched not all of them live, but I've watched them all, which also I don't really want to add up how much money I've played in pay-per-views. But it was what am I saying? So the most recent one was there was King of the Table 11, King of the Table 10, which happened in February. And then the next King of the Table is King of the Table 11 on June 1st.
So that's coming up.
Yep, that's on Saturday. So I'm planning to buy the pay-per-view and
so they just stream it through a site.
Yep.
I guess, yeah. I mean, pay-per-view streaming seems like, strange nowadays, and being able to watch anything online. But like the alternative would be like having sponsored ads and like sponsored by whoever. And
at this point, you need some sort of like a TV, like a station to pick it up, and no one's going to do that. Oh. And like, so this is the option we have. There's going to be some great matches in King of the Table 11. Devin dropped out, which is totally cool. He was just up against Levon. He needs some time. That makes absolute sense. I'm not worried about that. Michael Todd is up. I think this might have
what
changed.
Happened with Devin's match with who'd you say?
Well, so Devin basically just said, I need a break. I mean, these matches it's cool that he's putting out so many of them, but they happen so close to each other that it is like insane to ask athletes to do this as much as we're doing. And so he just needs a break, which I completely understand. Nobody is giving him any crap for that, because he needs to chill out. He just needs to like take a rest. There's some other big matches. Uh, so Ryan Bowen, anybody listening to this who is on the internet and is at all associated with arm wrestling knows about Ryan Bowen, and I will save any. If you're interested, go look him up. People love him or they hate him or a little bit of both.
I'm curious.
Or a little bit of neither.
Not familiar.
Somebody made some comment a while back that that there was no chance Engen would ever let Ryan Bowen into a one of his tournaments or one of his competitions, and then suddenly we see him in there. I'm also not going to make any official statements about Engen. I will let you all go out and find his social medias, and I want you to make your assessment of the man. Keep in mind he is the only reason that arm wrestling exists at a professional level right now. But he's human. But he's going up against School Bus. That should be a good match. Paul Lynn, who is a strong dude, 105 kg super match. He's going up against Lachlan Adair, who is supposed to be up against Michael Todd, but not happening. Said it's Paul Lynn. Michael Todd is, or no, sorry, I screwed that up. No, Paul Lynn, is going up against Lachlan. Michael Todd's going up against Lars Rohrbachen, who's a Norwegian. That should be a good match. I'm excited to see that match. I know Michael Todd's been training like a crazy person, and Lars is a strong dude, but I think they're a pretty good matchup, and that should be a good thing to watch. There was supposed to be a Dennis Tsiplankov and Hermes Gasparini match, which would have been great. Dennis is kind of like, he's one of those guys that if you're in arm wrestling, you know him. Devin arm wrestled him many, many years ago, like 10, 12, 15 years ago. And Dennis beat him. Dennis was when he was in his prime was unbeatable. I mean, the guy he's like the juggernaut.
So what is the age distribution of these competitors? It seems like some of them have been around for a while.
All of the above.
It's been around for a while with 2005 being like the first like televised or type thing.
Yeah, I mean they've been around a long time. The thing is, like, arm wrestling is a lot of tendon strength. So yeah, you're building muscle, but there's a upper limit to muscle size strength. And at a certain point you're working off basically tendon strength, and tendon strength, as I was once told, is earned, not built. And so, like, a lot of these guys they get better, but they're just like any other athlete. You stop training, you lose it, and you're not whatever. Todd Hutchins was going to be in a match against Kidragali Ongarbayev, but that's not going to happen. Because of lots of things. But I'm really disappointed that Dennis Hermes match isn't going to happen, though I'm pretty sure Hermes would have destroyed Dennis, and I'm sure Hermes is unhappy that doesn't have that match, because Hermes is a force to be.
So these matches are like the opening matches, and then they do like a tournament after that?
Well, so there's usually on the card they have some best of 5 matches, best of 7 matches. I think earlier I was saying best of 6. I meant best of 7. We'll just make that edit now. It's best of 7, but usually there's some opening matches, and then they'll do the super matches. And so the super matches are all best of 10, and best of 7. And those are they take a little longer. But then there's some matches that are like best of 5s that are not super matches. They're just kind of putting 2 guys up against each other. And it looks like Oleg Petrenko is taking on Kidragali Ongarbayev. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it sounds cool.
Sounds right.
Because Oleg was supposed to be, I think he was supposed to be up against somebody else. But now that's changing around. But this is what happens with these matches, and it's okay. It's just like things happen, and you're asking athletes to do a lot in a small amount of time. But so that's something to look forward to. Again, if people want to watch it, you just got to go to coresports.com, and then you buy the pay-per-view. And usually, after it's done, you can pay and watch. Like, you can watch a replay of it. Engen has a YouTube channel. He'll post a whole bunch of stuff on there after the fact. I mean, if you're gonna watch it, plan on a day. It starts about I think it starts at noon Central Time, and it'll take at least probably 3 to 4 hours to run through the whole card, if not more, depending on what happens. Because I mean, there's time in between matches, and they get rest periods, and depending on how many fouls there are. I mean, we didn't go into the in depth about with fouls and running fouls and restarts and stuff, but sometimes a single bout between two guys can last forever because you're you said, essentially haven't left round one because there's so many running fouls that you just keep on doing the same thing.
Does that become a strategy? Like in other sports, causing a foul becomes a strategy of the game, which becomes annoying in some sports.
Yeah.
Like basketball and hockey to some degree. Drawing a foul is a thing you do to give yourself time to recover. And
I don't know enough to know if that is. I mean, I wouldn't doubt it. I don't know. I mean, I would think so, right? I mean, if you're a person who benefits from making this as long as possible and as brutal as possible, then go for it.
King of the Table 11.
King of the Table 11, June 1st. And then we'll have plenty of time to talk about the next East vs. West. But arm wrestling, I mean, it's not the sport you probably think it is. It involves skill. There are people that do it that are not just, meat-headed.
Yeah. I mean, as the dummy in the room here right now in terms of arm wrestling, what I've watched, having a good commentator talk you through it, is helpful. And,
absolutely. And there's plenty of content out there for people to find. I mean, Engen posts a ton of competition stuff. Devin Larrett's got all his social media is great. Michael Todd has put out endless amounts of content on social media, etc. Some of these guys are a little bit less. Matt Mask is another Canadian who is a great dude. He has a merch line. If you've ever seen Matt Mask's hands before, go out and find Matt Mask's hands. He has a shirt line that is just a picture of his hand. He's got some interesting looking hands.
I mean, I was joking earlier about holding hands, but it is an intimate sport in terms of just testing someone's strength.
Yeah, well, I mean, and a lot of it's feeling out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and then how you're going to combat that. Yeah,
so you and Anthony will be back to talk about what happens in King of the Table 11.
Yeah, we'll talk results, King of the Table 11. Other things to keep maybe on your radar if you're paying attention to all this stuff. There are some strongman events coming up relatively soon. Why won't this open? So there's a Giants Live competition coming up. Europe's Strongest Man, that already happened. Sorry, England's Strongest Man and Britain's Strongest Woman are happening on June 22nd. So those are Giants Live things. So if you want to watch those, you just go to giantslive.com. You can pay for the paper. You can pay for that service to watch it. So you can watch both of those. There's a Strongman Classic, which is also a Giants Live event happening in July, early July, July 13th. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff we'll be talking about moving on from there. And way in the future, the official Strongman Games are happening in Madison, Wisconsin in December. So
yeah, exciting.
We'll be doing a lot moving up to that and at it.
If you're gripping,
we're talking.